let's jump right into the first story, which is all of the WWE cuts that we have not had a chance to speak of, and having a major name added to the list earlier this evening, that being Matt Riddle, who is no longer with the company. And the other names that we can, individualize later, but we have Mustafa Ali, Dolph Ziggler, Elias, Dana Brooke, Shelton Benjamin, Emma, Riddick Moss, Aliyah, Top Dolla, Rick Boogs, Dabba-Kato, Shanky, Mansoor, Mace, Quincy Elliott, Yulisa Leone, Bryson Montana, Ikemen Jiro, and then several developmental talents that people might not have gotten a chance to see yet, unless, the odd appearance on Level Up. But we had a Brooklyn Barlow, Kevin Ventura-Cortes, Daniel McArthur, Abdul Abadi Fitzgerald, and Alexis Gray. That looks to be the list. A lot of these names, whether they were reported or talent that have divulged the information themselves, but that is the most complete list we have at this moment. I wanted to start off with Matt Riddle because he is the freshest name, and he had been off television of late after that incident at JFK International Airport that I guess he, through other channels, had disputed that was the reason he was off television, citing a health issue that he was dealing with. But he has been let go. And I think that one speaks volumes about a guy that has certainly had his tribulations with this company over the years. And when push came to shove, his name was not going to be saved through these cuts.
No. It's a cut that I feel like has been met with a lot of online audiences feeling like this is understandable, given I think several controversies at this point attached to his name from the moment that he got called up until most recently now. And I don't know if you can really hold a rehab stint against somebody or not, but I part of me makes me wonder if like that was another strike against him, whether or not he is going to be a dependable hand throughout the rest of the course of his career as for this company.
The serious stuff is what you have to look at of like someone with this much television exposure, he is going to find bookings, but what size of a role is he going to have? Specific, a lot of these names we're going to instantly look at AEW. And I think at the very least, there is a pause of whether you are getting into the Matt Riddle business. If you are AEW, and quite frankly, I think you have to be doing your due diligence before you make such a commitment and what you are potentially hiring.
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot of like what has been attached to the Matt Riddle name has come out as a result of like this sort of news. Ultimately it's up to the promotions to decide. There have been people who I think have had, even greater controversies attached to their names that have found steady work in professional wrestling. He's very talented, but something I will also say that I, maybe may have contributed to maybe his current release is the fact that I don't know if he managed to show that he was capable of advancing his role within the company beyond sort of like the broy, best friend type of kind of punchline-y type of wrestler. He has basically kind of one working character, and that's to be sort of like the goofy best friend of the guy that's actually serious.
Yeah, and I mean, I would be curious as well, like what the attitude would be of a New Japan that have utilized talents that I mean I don't know how much they're going to be deterred by some of his reputation. It's all up in, but this is like by far the biggest name of the cuts, and is one going that a lot of companies will be under the microscope that utilize him and what his next step is. I mean, he's an ultra talented performer, but comes with like a lot of issues and controversies, and even the small stuff that might not seem that big in hindsight, but just the stuff with Goldberg and tweets that he's trying to start his own feuds with, like that stuff will really irk people in a locker room.
Let's not forget a pretty contentious relationship with the UFC and Dana White in particular through the public eye.
That had a really nasty falling out with it as well. Yeah, it's,
and
you know, it is.
and he's part of that company. He's
Right. Oh yeah. As I understand that. Yeah. You know, it was a very ugly fallout, and Matt Riddle had, you know, harbored some really ill feelings towards Dana White with the way that whole thing ended around a decade ago or so. Some of the other names here, I guess, the other, I would say, significant ones were Mustafa Ali, which came as a bit of a surprise given that he was booked on this next No Mercy card to take on Dominic Mysterio, and had just done a promo on Tuesday that he would be showing up to Raw for Dominic Mysterio and Dragon Lee's match. So, I mean, if nothing else, it does tell you whether it be the long-term decisions of who was going to be cut, or just one department not keeping another informed, that here is a guy that is booked through this pay-per-view cycle and is cut midway through and will just not be referenced at all, you would assume as well. And of course, Dolph Ziggler, who had been with the company in some form or fashion since 2004, and seemed to be the guy getting a ton of praise from a lot of his colleagues and peers. And at 43 years of age, I would say there's been a contingent of fans that for years have wanted to see this guy get out of a system that was not going to fully be behind him. He is on the older side, but as we can see in this industry, 43 is not what 43 was a generation ago. And I mean, this guy's in fantastic shape, and I think he's going to have as much curiosity as anyone in terms of someone that you have only seen in a WWE system, and should be able to, like, I think he's going to have, you know, if providing he's not going to price himself out, that, you know, this guy will have a ton of offers of where to go.
I think the pricing is the biggest question. I mean, you know, a guy who's been there for 19 years, I can't imagine.
And probably had some very good years.
Yeah, and at this point, like, I can't imagine him. Like, he's an understandable kind of cost cutting measure, I suppose. You know, for a guy who has probably been there for so long, and you would assume has received raises every time he's renegotiated, but has not really been used at all in any sort of significant role on TV. You can understand, I guess, when you're looking at the books, why you would cut a Dolph Ziggler to free up that space. But the other question stemming from that assumption is, could Dolph Ziggler work for a lot less, presumably? Because I don't see this guy necessarily getting big money, because I don't think he's a big difference maker for really, you know, an AEW or really any other promotion that would be able to afford.
Out of the gate at some of these like signings and like big independent shows, like he will, when he first, like a lot of these people, it's 90-day no competes. Out of the gate, like he'll have some good interest. But you're right, like if he's looking for a Matt Cardona kind of run, I mean, you have to be, you know, pricing yourself accordingly, that you're going to be used routinely instead of just cashing in for your name value fresh off television.
And it's very possible, like, he could be at the point where now he's completely comfortable with his finances, and he's just looking to have fun again in professional wrestling. And I could see him maybe going into GCW just for the fun of it. Obviously, potential tag team with his brother, if that's available. It's possible. I also, you know, would have to assume that maybe he has an interest outside of, you know, obviously like the stand-up comedy and whatnot, that he might want to take this opportunity to pursue while still finding a landing spot on television, whether that be through an AEW or even an Impact.
Yeah, Impact is always the interesting one, that they have, you know, taken a lot of sort of reclamation projects or people that have not met that potential yet. Like people that AEW might not have the room for, that maybe Impact is not going to be able to compete dollar-wise with AEW, but certainly can creative-wise. And that's where I look at, like, someone I would be very high on is a Riddick Moss, who I think we saw glimpses of what this guy, of what he could do in the ring, but was just in a terrible character. And two guys that just in the early 24-hour period since they've left, that I think have put quite a spotlight on them, is Mansoor and Mace. Like, these two guys, like just that Reservoir Dogs promo that they put out, that they shot and sent in, I'm really intrigued to see these guys without handcuffs on, of what they have in store. I guess with the AEW question, like, they only have so many spots, and yet they always seem to create new spots. Like, realistically, is like, I wouldn't see too many of these names being on their radar, but like, do you?
Well, what does it mean to have an AEW spot these days? Like full time, I think it's going to be a very small handful that might even get that consideration. But an appearance on Rampage, certainly Ring of Honor, like, like one of these sort of like per appearance types of deals, I could see a lot of them getting a look. And if they happen to catch fire with an audience, I mean, that's always a possibility.
I would see Ali being very high as having that potential to go right to an AEW, for instance. Emma could certainly help a women's division. She was just in Impact before going to WWE.
I think her and Moss, like, I can almost like completely easily see an Impact. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they are kind of cultivating their husband and wife division. So, I mean, those two could slide into that as well.
Yeah.
Top Dolla, I've always enjoyed this guy's promos. This run was a disaster for him. Like that dive it shouldn't have been the mark of death, but Michael Cole made sure it was.
And Cole's like, I mean, it could be Cole acting on his own behalf, but he's trying to like pop like everybody in the back, and every's in.
And they had no problem with him doing it routinely. So it was clearly this guy is the butt of the joke, and we are more than happy to showcase him in that light. I'm very surprised that like BFAB and Ashanti are still there because I mean, they just, I don't know where you go when one of the group members is gone, and those two just seem as though like they're in the same position that many of these others were.
Top Dollar was certainly the lead of the act, without Swerve being there. I think there are, I suppose, suggestions that like we don't know what personality wise these people are like backstage, and whether or not they have quote unquote heat with other members that might have kind of like led to these sort of decisions as well. I certainly don't have concrete knowledge of any of that, but we can't discount maybe some of that as for the reasoning. How well do people mix with the locker room backstage? Don't know.
There are going to be people in these, like some of these names. I especially look at the ones who might have been like athletes that came in through the tryout system, that like, this is just a totally different world to go into the independent wrestling scene when all is the Performance Center. But two people I want to throw your way of what you could see being their future is Rick Boogs and Elias.
Man. So I think we often see people through these sort of releases. The people that tend to find success on the indies, and I would even extend to, I don't know, AEW, are people who have a reputation of being really good in the ring first and foremost, and not necessarily the people more so known for their character work. And you're talking about two guys who are pretty much only known for, their character work in Elias and Ezekiel and
it's a package deal. You
three people, him. Elias, Ezekiel, and also Boogs. I mean, Elias achieved, I would say, a lot more than Boogs did in his run, and I could see him. I think he's demonstrated a lot of just ability to be entertaining, and I think creative, I would say as well. And I think that could go a long way, maybe even in an AEW, but certainly I think, again, an Impact would probably make great use of him. He'd be actually,
I think both would fit in really well, like in that Johnny Swinger type of role in Impact that they would get behind. And Rick Boogs is one that, for someone that's going to lose his WWE name, his actual name is even better.
Way better.
Eric Bugenhagen. Yeah. I mean, perfect. Elias, he will not be, unless maybe he can come up with some new moniker.
But, some of these are quite heartbreaking. I mean, you remember Elias, you remember that Seattle crowd, it just how magical of a moment that was. I would say like there are several instances throughout his stint where he really felt like a legitimate star that they could have done a whole lot with. But clearly, under a Triple H regime, did not see that same sort of appeal. Rick Boogs was doing really well up until that injury at WrestleMania. You remember?
It was very unfortunate, the timing, and then they moved Nakamura.
He was the face of the Hard. He was the face of the Hard Lemonade whole campaign, and after that, they never used him again.
Like before that WrestleMania injury, if you were to ask me who would be in a better spot a year and a half from now, Rick Boogs or Shinsuke Nakamura, I mean, I don't know if I would have been leaning towards Shinsuke Nakamura, who is just sort of, just running in place. And Rick Boogs, you could look at him and see, he had a ton of charisma and over with the audience, and someone that could mature out of just this gimmick as the sidekick and into something more sustainable. And yeah, this relationship, this mentor mentee, this thing went nowhere. I mean, unfortunately for most here, like it was all people that.
But just on these two in particular, I really do feel like it's more of like, it's sort of like a taste difference between. I don't exactly know when they might have dropped this, but like it's very clear to me, maybe under a Paul Levesque, WWE, there's not as much room for this sort of silliness. And I think a lot of the audience is actually grateful for it. But, that's not to take away from what were some bright spots in terms of sports entertainment that both of these two had.
Paul Levesque also brought back Dexter Loomis, so let's not discount that part.
Good point.
Another person who is, off, disappeared as well. So anyway, those are the key names here. Dana Brooke, another one who had been there for a fair amount of time as well.
Aliyah,
who has been there years at this point. Like she signed there. She's from Toronto. She signed there when she was 20 and was just very early on. Like I remember seeing her at a local show, right around before she got signed. Like she only had a little bit of experience before heading to the PC. So yeah, there's a lot of these names. It's very unfortunate for many of these people. And, this is a sort of sink or swim moment for a lot of these performers. There are the ones that, you can look at it and it's not a guarantee that just because you were in WWE, you're going to find work elsewhere. You have to hustle, you have to work hard, but there are the success stories out there. Matt Cardona, it's, the ones that are really going to work and embrace the independent system because it's very different. It's a lot more demanding. Everything is on you.
And it's not guaranteed, and it's going to hurt a lot more probably because the demands of the styles could be certainly a lot more than maybe what a lot of these guys were doing. And that was probably just sitting and catering and doing nothing. But for a lot of people, driving to an indie and working in front of 20 people might be better than just sitting and catering and waiting for something to do. So.
And for all we talk about how many hours of programming AEW is producing, I mean, one of the silver linings to that is they do require a lot of people. It creates the need for more people to have, regular work with that company as well. So I'm also curious, like a Shelton Benjamin, like he is up there. Like, does he go on like one final run somewhere? Like you could see him coming in and sort of getting that sort of status as somebody that has, this guy's run here. This WWE run was, he got like 7 years out of this second WWE run. I mean, he came right back when the brand split was reintroduced in 2016. So he was there for quite a bit. And the Hurt Business was, that's going to be one of the, I'm sure those guys years from now, they're going to be doing their StarCast panel about what could have been with that group and how it got broken up out of nowhere. And unfortunately, it meant not great things for Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin.
No, with Shelton, I really do wonder like how much they were intending on ever giving him like a serious push, because from what it seemed like to me was after the brand split, they only hired him back because they needed an experienced hand to fill out
what
the
those
roster.
Guys were there for.
Yeah. And ultimately, I guess, does he look at this as a disappointment, or does he look at it like, hey, I made 7 years of WWE money when I wasn't really even supposed to?
Been a quiet story. Smackdown is leaving Fox at the end of this contract and is moving back to the USA Network.